Good afternoon. We will start the event in about 5 minutes. Working. Good afternoon. Okay. I'll start again. Good afternoon. Welcome to the IAEA Atoms for Climate Pavilion. It is Youth Day, and in the context of Youth Day, we have organized a session in 2 parts to give the perspective of young professionals related to the nuclear technology that support the fight against the effects of climate change. My name is Gert Pille. I will be the moderator of this session, and I am a young professional in nuclear myself, as I work as a nuclear mechanical engineer at Tractebel in Belgium. But enough about me, because I'm honored to introduce 4 remarkable young professionals from different backgrounds that have agreed to share their experiences and their perspectives in the context of Atoms for Climate. All the way at the end, we have Dr. Everlyne Achieng, who is a medical officer at the Ministry of Health in Kenya. We have Dinara Yermakova, a nuclear engineer and PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, as well as a technical consultant at the Anthropocene Institute. She is from Kazakhstan. We have Veeshesh Sunnassy from Mauritius, but based in Canada. He is a real-time energy market coordinator by profession and the president of a North American Young Generation chapter by passion. And next we have Wojciech Zajaczkowski from Poland. He is communications and public affairs consultant and a member of Voices of Nuclear. Finally, I would like to welcome for his opening statement someone who might not fall under the definition of a young professional in nuclear, but who has been a great inspirational leader for us. Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Mariano Grossi.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be with you for this event and for this conversation, because frankly, I see this as a conversation among professionals on something that is of concern for us all, and on which your individual perspectives are obviously indispensable in more than one way. I think it has become commonplace to say, and we hear it time and again, that the current challenges posed by climate change and many other global problems, of course, are hitting in particularly the young generation, and the young generation in developing countries where almost 80% of those who are young are living. So this, of course, requires for global leadership in different areas and fields to have a responsible look at it, which is not only unilaterally based on top-down guidelines and directives and policies, but also on what we are trying to do here today, which is an exchange to try to get it better by taking into consideration the views of those who are in this first, if not early, first stages of your professional path. So, as I understand, we are going to have a tour de table or tour de role of your individual experiences, and if the moderator agrees, I would like to put an initial question to each one of you to get your perspectives on different things that have to do with the problem in its globality, and also for us at the IAEA with the specific mandate that we have and the activities that we are carrying out all over the world, to see to it that they adjust well to the real problems that we are having, as seen by this generation. So, of course, Everlyne, you are a medical doctor.
Yes.
And as you know, one of the important things that the IAEA is trying to do is to provide answers with nuclear medicine, with nuclear technology, to some of the most dramatic issues of our time. And we are trying to do it, you may have heard, through programs like Rays of Hope, which was launched in Africa, and although not limited to Africa, is having Africa as one of its main, I would say, points of interest. So I would be very grateful if you could share with me your professional experience, your views on how we can adapt to the current needs, to the magnitude of the problem, as you see it.
Thank you so much, DG Grossi, for your remarks, and thank you so much for your question.
Put it closer to your mouth, maybe, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, DG Grossi, for your remarks and also your question. So my name is Everlyne Achieng. I'm a medical doctor based in Kenya. I'm also an IAEA fellow in nuclear medicine. So for me, the field of oncology is very personal to me and very intimate to me, because in 2017, I was diagnosed with benign breast tumors. And also in 2020, I lost my dad due to pancreatic cancer. So for me, oncology and being in this field is not only about a professional journey, but also a personal journey and very intimate journey. So I'm also, apart from being an IAEA fellow in nuclear medicine, I'm also the first woman in Kenya who has ever been taken by IAEA to be trained in nuclear medicine. And this is a very, very new field in Kenya, because previously we've been using chemotherapy, and as you know, chemotherapy is, destroys all the cells compared to the use of radioisotope that actually focuses and concentrates treatment to the particular tumor. So for me, it's a great opportunity to share this and also invite other young women to be involved in this career and be a change agent, not only in their family, but also their communities.
Oh, indeed, and let me say that when it comes, well, as you know, Rays of Hope has Kenya as one of the initial batch of countries in which we are trying to provide radiotherapy services. So the work there is only starting, but of course the needs are so dramatically high that we will need as much help as we can. And we need young professional Africans like yourself to be steering this plan and this program. So you must know that your efforts are going to be supported, and we will continue to support you,
Thank you very much.
In this, Doctor, because it is really what needs to be done. If I may turn to Dinara. Dinara, you are, as I learned from my team, you are working on industry, innovation, infrastructure, and this is also another side of the IAEA work, seen from the perspective, in this case, of nuclear energy. What is your view? How do you see? I mean, you are living in California, where the nuclear debate is quite, emotional, even one would say, for those following the Diablo Canyon debate. So, as a young professional looking into infrastructure and energy issues, how do you see this in the next few decades?
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the question. So, Diablo Canyon issue is one of the depicting moment of policy and regulatory issues in the United States. And especially in California, it was very important to advocate for having nuclear power plant because we have draw issues. And many countries rely on hydropower as the storage to back up some of energy issues from solar and wind. And unfortunately, in the United States, it's a very vivid example that sometimes we cannot rely always on hydropower because we are expecting climate changes, we're expecting that there will be less water, and it's important to have in mind that nuclear power has much more to offer than just electricity. There's water desalination options, there are ways to decarbonize the industry such as steel production, green buildings, because in the next 40 years, we're expecting to double building footage around the world. And with that in mind, we will have doubling the steel and cement production. And all this need to be decarbonized. And I see a big role of nuclear in basically providing that high quality heat and stable baseload energy around the world. It's not about only California, but it's just the debate is kind of emotional, but we need to provide those different options beyond the electricity. And I think win around the Diablo Canyon was big win for all the nuclear community, because if it was done in California, I can say it can be done everywhere. If we can win extra 5 years for prolonging one nuclear power plant in California, it will be done anywhere else. That's my opinion.
And it's a very interesting one because you are there and you are living through it. Veeshesh, you live and work in Canada.
That is correct.
That is correct. And in Canada, the problem is different, or the situation is different. And as I learned, you work for a company that is in hydro. It's on a number of different areas. Maybe I'm wrong. No.
No, that's correct. So we have hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, and thermal.
Okay, so you should tell us. You know the recipe. You have everything on the menu.
That's correct, except coal, which is great because I'm from Ontario, and Ontario has already decarbonized the grid. 60% of the power comes from nuclear energy, about 20-30% from hydro, so which is great. And it's great because in my job, Gerd introduced myself as an energy markets coordinator. It's a different kind of business in the industry. Who knows what an energy markets coordinator does, basically, by a show of hand? Who knows about that? Only one.
One? No.
So maybe even you will learn something new today.
Yeah, of course.
And basically we find the most efficient times, economic times, to schedule our generation units. So the hydro, the nuclear, the thermal. And that's great because I get to see the important role that nuclear plays in the energy mix. Why? It's great. We've all heard from the plenary session on the first 2 days, all countries are increasing their wind and solar production. But we need nuclear to complement that. Why? Two main reasons. Because nuclear, first of all, it's reliable, 24/7, doesn't depend on weather, doesn't depend on the time, and also makes the grid affordable because with the penetration of solar, that tends to dip the demand curve. So you need something, some operational flexibility, which I get to see firsthand when I'm working.
Thank you very much. Before returning to you, let me turn to Wojciech. So you are Polish, but you are living in Paris. You're working there.
No, there are other cities in France.
You study there.
I studied in Paris.
Sciences Po.
Yes, that is correct. Now I live in Lyon, a bit
In
further
Lyon.
south. Yes.
Very good. And you have been also studying and looking at energy and economic growth. How do you see it? Are you looking at it from a European perspective? Your country, your own country, is been taking important decisions in this field. Well, what's your take?
Well, what really made me interested into energy is that, as you said, I come from Poland. Poland has a big coal problem. We are very dependent on it. Well, luckily, lately, as it has been announced 2 weeks ago, more or less, Poland is going to go big on nuclear. We're going to construct at least 2 power plants, one in the north, like by the sea, and the other further south in Wielkopolska. So it is. So I would not say that me coming from Poland is the biggest factor in that. It also has to do with my studies, because when I studied at Sunnassy Paris, I studied European regulation. So actually, when I got into nuclear, it was about that time when there was the very heated taxonomy debate. So this regulatory aspect has a lot to do with it as well.
Well, thank you very much. Let me return to Everlyne. Everlyne, do you have a mic? Thank you very much. So, in your first answer, you were telling me about your own experience, your own even family situation, and how this inspired you. We are working on Rays of Hope. What should I do as DG to get it right for Rays of Hope in Kenya? What is your advice to me?
Thank you so much for that great question. So number one, training. Training is very important. If IAEA can increase the capacity and opportunity for women to be trained in oncology and also nuclear medicine, that would be a very great step. Because as you realize, if from the global cancer statistics 2020, it shows us that the number 2 most causes of cancer deaths in Africa is breast cancer and cervical cancer. And you realize these are cancers that are affecting women. So if more women can turn up and I'd be provided for these opportunities to go and study and come back and make a change. That will be really, really important. Another thing is about short course trainings. Sometimes long-term trainings are expensive in the long run. So the existing doctors, if they can be equipped with short-term training so that they can impact their communities, that will really be a great opportunity as well. And also, we also need radioisotope production centers in Kenya, since there's no existing public radioisotope centers in Kenya. There's only one hospital that cannot serve 50 million Kenyans. So that we have a very big gap in that. And it would be really great if you could tap into those opportunities.
Let me ask you, you know that in Race of Hope we are thinking about individual country approaches, but also in sub-regional collaborative efforts, because the needs are so huge, like you're saying. Do you think that could work, or do you believe that given the specificities of the patient community and the health and the public health demands, it would be better to go country by country? What would be your advice to me?
I think country by country is very important, because each country has to be tailored to its needs. Each country has different priorities and different training capacities, and the human resource capabilities are also very different. So if IAEA can work with existing government in trying to tailor into the existing cancer needs of that particular country, that would be very noble. Yes.
Excellent. Well, we will certainly be working together on Race of Hope. And let me go back to Dinara. Dinara, your first answer was very interesting, related to California and this issue that we have been following. But I will invite you to look a little bit wider and give me the benefit of your perspective more globally on the interaction of nuclear and other CO2 free sources. How do you see nuclear? Where do you see the possibilities and the limitations?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and I wanted to narrow it down to developing world, where we will see more newcomers into nuclear energy adaptation. And I see a great potential to commercialize the hydrogen production, for example. It goes beyond the electricity generation for developing world when it comes to adapting the nuclear power. Beyond that, of course, we want to capture the carbon from air, and that's very energy-intensive process. That's far in the future. But I also see a great potential from nuclear making that happen. And another one of the most important issues is water access. And today's innovation to desalinate water was nuclear power plant, but in Kazakhstan we used to have a desalination nuclear power plant back in 80s. And I want to see that happen again across the globe, because it's very efficient. And unfortunately, we shut down the nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan. But that's a great invention, to use the power of atom to provide clean water across the globe, especially in the countries where they have extended drought, they don't have access to rivers. And African region is one of the regions where it's necessary to have access to water and electricity at the same time.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that. I'll turn again to Veeshesh, if I may. I noted in the information I got about you before talking to you, that you are the president of the North American Young Generation Durham, which means that you are leading colleagues, yours, friends, maybe. What do you see them thinking? What is worrying them? What is motivating them in terms of this type of work? And how do you see the work that you are doing helping them as a leader, as a young leader, actually?
That's correct, and very proud to be the president of the North American Young Generation in Nuclear chapter. In Ontario, we have about 1,000 members, So
How many?
1,000 members just
Oh.
for my chapter. So a lot of what we do, we go to schools, universities. We were just in one of the schools last month. 100 students came in to listen to us, mostly because we offered pizza. But one of the
Yeah.
first thing I asked them, how many of them knew that nuclear was part of the Ontario electricity mix? How many you think raised their hand?
I don't know.
Less than 10.
Less than 10.
Less than 10. So by the end, with pizza and with a speech, we were able to show that nuclear is here. Just be aware of it. We were not trying to recruit them, but it's just that education and information piece. And now I see the reason why I got in nuclear. I'm from Mauritius,
Yeah.
so I left when I was 18. I had no clue that we have nuclear power as a source of electricity.
No,
mix.
of course.
And that's why once I went into nuclear, I was like, I don't want other people to be like me, not knowing about that. And that's why I decided advocacy is great. So your question to what I see now and what motivates them, I think now with the education piece, with us, showing them what we do, and we can see the diversity here, not just in terms of gender and regions, but in terms of our job, different sectors, medicine, student, social, myself in electricity market. So there's a lot of opportunities in nuclear, lots of ways we can impact SDGs like climate change. And I think that's what motivates them, because everyone sees climate change now. They know they are real.
Indeed, indeed. If I may turn back to Wojciech, in your studies and in your experience, there is also, I recognize also the economic dimension and the economic analysis. And this has been some of the important drivers as well in Poland in terms of generating a domestic supply chain and how this could impact the whole economy. How do you see that impacting the overall energy sector and the economy at large?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, because we currently have a heated debate whether building nuclear power plants, it provides more jobs than renewable energies when we deploy renewables. Actually, in Poland, we have a problem with a very urgent need for just transition for large groups of miners in the south, in the Silesia region. We need to create many jobs for them, to use their experience to let them strive in new experiences. From the recent studies that have been published, for example, constructing a nuclear power plant in Poland, just during the construction phase, we can create more or less 10,000 jobs during the construction process.
Yes.
Yes, and over the operation, it can be over the 50 years of operation at least, because nuclear reactors can operate longer if we maintain them, around 40,000. So I think developing nuclear is a great opportunity, as it creates new jobs opportunities, not only for the workers in a very wide range of new job posts that you can have, but also for their families in the local communities. So on every level, there are positive things that are happening.
Well, thank you very much. Well, dear friends, you know how the COP is. After 20 minutes, you are in an ejection seat, and then you have to go and run to your next for your next appointment. So I will leave you. I understand, moderator, that you are going to continue. The event continues now. I just wanted to thank you for having had this opportunity to, albeit briefly, to listen from you, from your perspectives. Like you were saying, it's a diverse panel, work-wise, experience-wise, nationality-wise, background-wise. But what is so encouraging is that we see this common purpose, this idea that nuclear science applications, energy, have a place at the table, which is basically what the IAEA has been saying. At the end of the day, all of this is going to be in your hands very, very soon, if it's not already now. So my generation has the responsibility to make it possible and to make space for you to take the reins and lead us all. So thank you for that effort. You must know that in the IAEA you have an organization and a group of people that wants to work with you, wants to open doors, wants to listen to all of you. And you can continue counting on us. And thank you again for having taken the time, joining me. Moderator, thank you very much for your steering. And I leave you now. I know that you continue, and we'll continue bumping on each other in the busy corridors of Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very, very much to all.
Before you leave, Director General, I would like to thank you in the name of all nuclear young professionals for your continued support. Director General Grossi. Taking the place of the Director General is no one other than Craig Jantzen, Climate Change Advisor at the IAEA, with a PhD in nuclear physics, who is also a young professional in nuclear? Yes. Okay. Welcome, Craig. What would you like to learn from our young professionals on the panel?
Thank you. Thank you for the warm reception. It's been a really interesting discussion so far, so I'd like to just carry on where we left off. So, Everlyne, have you got a microphone? Good. Hi. So we were talking a little bit before the event started, and you said that actually you were very likely going to be the first nuclear medical doctor in Kenya. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about, maybe some advice you would give for others that are going to be following in your footsteps.
Yes. So I think I would like to encourage many women in the African young generation in nuclear to explore these opportunities that are provided by IAEA, so that we can bridge the gap between the male and females. So as I've just informed you that the number 2 rise cases of cancer in Africa are due to breast cancer 16% and cervical cancer 10%. So we really need so many women to come in and close in the gap and be experts and consultants in this field so that they can provide treatment solutions to these cancer cases.
Thank you. And can you just tell us a little bit more about what the situation is like on the ground in terms of accessibility and how is nuclear medicine available at the moment?
So that's an interesting question because actually I'm going to present a paper that I worked on about accessibility of radiotherapy services in Kenya in public hospitals, which is a very dire need, and it's a very, how do I put it, like there's a huge need for the government to provide easily and accessible services, especially in radiotherapy and nuclear medicine applications. So we only have one public hospital, unfortunately, in Kenya that provides nuclear medicine vis-a-vis a population of 50 million Kenyans. And also the nuclear medicine profession is in Kenya, we only have males, less than 5 males in the field, and no woman, because I'm still on training, who has completed their training. So we have deficiencies in terms of human capacity. We still don't have a radioisotope unit. We only have one in that one public hospital, and it's within the city. So people who are in the peripheral counties are kind of missing on these cancer care treatment options.
Thank you. I'll move on to Dinara. Hi. So again, we were talking off stage before about your PhD research in basic terms so I could understand. But could you just tell us a little bit more about, because I think a lot of people just view, when they're thinking about new energy systems and energy sources, their minds immediately go to just the cost and how that isn't the full picture. And you've got to really take a life cycle assessment view. Tell us a little bit more about just your opinion on that.
Yeah, that's part of my research to understand what material demand will be expected in the next 30 years as we transition to cleaner energy sources. And this is very important to understand that most of the raw materials are extracted from developing countries where the regulatory framework is either at rudimentary state or it's very vague and easily to avoid. And because of that, at least in my opinion, it tackles the problem of environmental justice, because most of the countries where the resources are, let's say Congo for cobalt production, Latin America for lithium production, they not necessarily will benefit from technological advancement, but their land will be exploited to get the resources. And my research tackles how much of a mining we will be getting in the next 30 years, how much of a shipping will imply, because we having this very complex supply chain issue, because nothing is produced in one country. One material goes from Latin America to China to create to produce the component, and then from China it ships to the United States. So it creates additional carbon that already embedded, and we don't know how exactly to account for. And of course, in my research, I try to make as many assumptions, but this is something I haven't seen in research, and this is something that may change as we start thinking about localized production and account for labor cost as we start to go away from only Chinese production. So this is the problems I'm trying to research and investigate in my particular work.
I was going to carry on. So are you optimistic? Is this something that's getting addressed then? Are you expecting these kinds of factors to be considered?
I wouldn't say I'm super optimistic, because things are done when economics works, and so far economics works when we produce things outside of the United States. And I bring up the example of the United States since especially California have been a leader of adaptation of clean energy sources such as solar, wind, and we're very proud about that, but it means we outsourced most of the carbon emissions to other countries. And I think this is important to discuss how can we avoid that, because yes, China does most of the work and most of the labor is not paid equally. So how can we do that better? So now we're discussing, okay, how much we can localize, make mining locally, go away with some, bring some projects inside the US. That will lead to cost shift, because right now we see how deep the cost of solar and wind production, but as we start localizing, we will start seeing the real cost of renewables, and in that case, we might see that nuclear is not as bad in terms of the economical situation. We might compete. But before we bring the localized production, that will be the case where nuclear will be expensive compared to other technologies produced overseas.
Thank you. Veeshesh, how are you doing? So in your conversation with the DG earlier, you're from Ontario and you're working there, and that you've actually you've decarbonized the grid there successfully with a mix of technologies. I'm sure you've heard this in COP27. Quite a few people think that 100% renewables is the way to go. I just wanted to get your thoughts on is that feasible?
I heard that actually. So I was in the plenary session on the second day, heard about 30 head of states. Everyone mentioned renewable energy in their speech. I heard only Macron mention nuclear. One interesting one was the European Union President, Ursula. She mentioned by the end of this year, Europe would have added 50 gigawatt of renewable energy. What I think, so in terms of renewable energy, we all agree that renewable energy will be probably the main source of energy in the next few years. But we need something to complement it, because solar is not 24/7, it's not reliable. Sometimes it's not there. So it adds fluctuation to the supply side because if it's cloudy or if there's a change in the direction, your megawatt is not the same. Similar to wind as well. So you need something that, because it's good to think about clean sources of power, and we all know wind, solar, nuclear is there, but the base load is important. That's why hydro and nuclear plays a strong part in the electricity mix. And the way I see that, like, because we are in Egypt, we think of the pyramid, right? You need a strong base. So nuclear, hydro can provide that. The solar and wind, they are intermittent. So they are there when they are there. So that's the second layer. And then the third layer is the peaks, right? So if you need additional energy for the peak, for example, natural gas, that's where they fit in. So that's why I think 100% renewable energy, it won't be possible 100% of the time.
Thank you. And so I think as well, something that I found in a lot of conversations is people confuse electricity with energy, and that actually electricity is usually quite a small part of the energy that we use. And that, I mean, I'll take the UK for example. I think the electricity is only 30% of their whole energy use also. So, you know, as we electrify transport and we electrify heating and we grow the energy sector, you know, maybe from the Ontario perspective, as your demand is growing, maybe 2 to 3 times over the next few decades, can you just scale up the system as it is? Do you need anything extra, or what's the kind of...
Because that's right. When we think of energy, like I think 3 main sources, right? So the energy production, heating, and transportation. And we want to electrify the heating and transport system. So your energy demand is going to grow. In terms of Ontario, of course, you need additional power. That's why in Ontario, it was announced that they're looking at one of the nuclear power plants there to extend its lifetime and go into refurbishment. The other plant, which is Darlington, it's already in the process of refurbishment. So they are looking at nuclear being a major part of the mix and staying so, because you'll need that strong base load. And then with the renewables keep ramping up, because we will need that in the future. And also with climate change, we've seen that the heat waves are more now. We've seen that in Europe, also in Canada. And for example, you see that every 1 degree C rise, you'll add 200, 300 megawatts in demand. So you got to find that, right? Nuclear provides you that quantity of power and also quality of power. I say quantity because 100 megawatts it can provide you. In Ontario, one maximum unit about 900, 1,000 megawatts. And in terms of quality too, right? Because it helps balance the grid in terms of your megavars, in terms of your frequency control, voltage control. So very important too.
So, and last question, because I don't really get to speak to operators very much. So, in terms of energy resilience, obviously there's a change in climate, and you know, mitigating emissions is one thing, but also adapting to a changing climate. Do you see what are the major risks of rising temperatures, drought, this kind of thing to your energy mix? And is that something that Ontario are factoring in?
That's a great question. In Ontario, maybe you will see it less than other countries. Some continents are more affected, like Africa. And I believe like the IESO on the Ontario side, which is the electricity regulator, is looking at that. How does climate change affect the energy demand, and what's the plan for that?
Thank you. And Wojciech, another question before we go to, I think, a Q&A with the audience. So if everyone wants to start thinking of the questions ahead of time. So you're a communicator, and I'm sure you've been speaking to lots of people during your time at COP27 on the benefits of nuclear and climate change. What are some of the themes that are arising in your conversations here, and how are you approaching that?
Thank you for this question. Well, first of all, today we were walking around with our polar bear, which is like our thing that we use at the Voices of Nuclear to approach people to make them more relaxed. And we were asking young people, because it's a youth day, we're asking them, what do you think about nuclear energy? And actually most of them were saying, we're quite shy, because they were saying, actually I've never given it a thought, like I've never thought about it. And I was also one of these people until very recently, so I understand them. It's just that I did not give that much attention to nuclear energy when I was younger. We're just hearing about renewables all the time, and in people's head, energy transition is simply a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. Luckily, we've got nuclear, so this is something that pops that I think is the main issue here, just that people don't think about it. In France, where Voices of Nuclear are based, there is a big anti-nuclear society, unfortunately. So the issues that we've been that are raised by people the most often are the waste and the accidents. So these are these two things that we are talking about. Luckily, in our association, we've got a great mix of people who are communicators like me, or Marie, who's here with me, but also a lot of specialists. So we can connect people with the specialists who can give the best solutions on waste, on accidents, and on other things that people are scared about. And finally, I think that the best way to address these issues is to use simple language. Not to use too much numbers, not to use too many metaphors. It's just to use simple language and to understand that people simply didn't really give it a bigger thought. They just heard something and it stayed in their head. So I think we should address people with an idea that they're open to dialogue and try to convince them like this.
And you just mentioned then in your answer that you were, relatively skeptical before you joined Voices for Nuclear. Was there a particular moment or conversation, or you came across a poll about that changed your mind?
I would not say I was skeptical. Like I said, I was just younger because I'm only 26, so I was not really thinking about nuclear. The reason why I changed my mind is, it was purely by chance. That's because I applied for an internship. It was 2020, coronavirus. Most of the people were not taking any interns. So I randomly applied for an internship at the Polish Ministry of Climate. And it turned out that they were looking for an intern at the Department of Nuclear Energy. And that's where I learned about taxonomy, about all the issues around nuclear, about the pros, about the cons. So that's where I started getting interested into that. And that's why I saw that actually it's an interesting topic, complicated one, but interesting one that other people want to hear about. When I was talking to my friends, when I was talking to people during the events we're organizing, they are interested in nuclear, they're interested in these issues, they're not skeptical, they just don't know.
And I know, a lot of the world is in an energy crisis at the moment. Has that, and kind of the recent events and the energy crisis, has that changed opinions on nuclear? Has that had an impact that you're seeing in your conversations?
Yes, it did. First of all, we've got a lot of studies over that appeared this year that show that in many countries the public opinion has shifted from being very anti-nuclear to at least admitting that for now it's a good option, that we should keep the nuclear plants in operation that we have. We saw that in the public opinion polls in Germany. We see the growing pro-nuclearism in France. In Poland, where I come from, actually society is largely pro-nuclear, and we don't have this problem there. But surely the energy crisis showed that having nuclear allows us to be more resilient to the energy shocks, to the fears that we can have when it comes to security of supply of uranium. And I think this message goes through to the society. People are aware, like in France, that they are not scared that out of the sudden they're not going to have electricity at home.
Thank you. Shall we go to Q&A with the audience?
Yes, I just wanted to say this has been amazing to see how you, at the relative start of your careers, have already shown that you are leaders in your respective domains. So, yes, what we can do now is turn to the audience. Is there anyone who would like to ask our panel about their experiences or perspectives in their careers in the nuclear industry?
Great session, by the way. I would like to ask each one of you, how do you see your industry? I mean, I know it's nuclear, but your specific job in 10 years. What do you want to see? And yeah, what do you want to see? Thank you.
Well, I go first as academic. Thank you for this question. I'm not able to say whether I have a very clear plan in mind where I'm going to be exactly in 10 years. All I know is that I want to keep working on energy issues, because energy transition is unfortunately a long-term problem that we have to face. And I'm going to stick to that, to energy issues, regulation, maybe diplomacy for now, communication, because this is the most important, and this is something that has real impact on everyday lives and everyday policies, to convince people that nuclear is a solution.
Shirley, thank you for your question. I personally believe it's the best time to be involved in this industry. The next 10 years, the next 20 years, I wouldn't want to change it. A lot of things are happening. Everyone is looking at energy transition, right? So we know the IEA and IAEA have said that nuclear energy, to meet the net carbon zero goal, nuclear energy has to double by 2050. We have to have about 550 gigawatt to meet that target. So that's going to be exciting to see if that happens. We have SMRs. It will be exciting to see how that fits into the grid. We had a panel at 1:30 to speak about hydrogen. We'll have hydrogen, which will help to grid flexibility. It's exciting. It's like people who wants to be involved in the industry, that's the best time to get in. And yeah. So in next 10 years, you'll always see me here then.
Do you want me to answer? Or? Yep. Is the microphone working? Can you hear me? Yep. I've always been interested in science in general, and energy and climate change. So I think just something similar to what I'm doing now, I guess. It's something between working with scientists and engineers, doctors, the public and government. So perhaps at the IAEA still, or in government, or in some kind of role where you get to come to places like this and be able to engage with people who are enthusiastic and passionate. But I agree. I think in terms of the nuclear industry, it's the best time to be. I think there's going to be loads of innovation. It's necessary, and I think net zero is really a game changer. To decarbonize down to 80% emissions, may be doable, but to get to net zero, I think really makes the case for nuclear. And the energy crisis is really put emphasis on nuclear's benefits.
I second Veeshesh about the exciting time to be in the field, because we haven't even explored half of the opportunities for nuclear in a field. We still have ocean shipping that can be decarbonized, because it accounts for 3 to 10% of all the emissions, and because of this weird logistical systems, we cannot really account for it. There's space sector, and there's so many things we can do with nuclear beyond just providing electricity. And just being in the field and trying to find the passion for yourself, that's amazing. I think you can do anything. And I think most of the things we can innovate in is how can we, as industry, communicate better and reach more population and provide more about benefits of nuclear. I think this is where we need to innovate more, and I think I will spend couple of years in that field as well. Another field which needs innovation and that will have greater impact is the financing sector, because right now it's really hard for newcomers to fund their own projects. Let's say it's too expensive to put 5 billion upfront for a project that will be built in 10 years. So I think this is where we need to spend more time and emphasize how important the financing and regulation, innovation. So I think like in the next 5 years, this should be fixed somehow, so we could progress further and expand more fields where nuclear can be implemented. And I myself, I don't know where I will end up in 10 years, maybe in the government, maybe in the policy sector. I don't mind either way, but I just want to see more information transparency, more innovation in the fields that I just mentioned, so every country would benefit from the technologies that we already have, and we conquered the atom energy. This is already something amazing we've done, and it's just we need to work with public and communicate all the benefits.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for that great question. I think for me, I have two things. So one, it will be about the study of genetics and oncology. So that is kind of lacking in Kenya. So families that are prone to have cancers like mine, we need to have studies so that people can be followed up right from childhood. And radiotherapy options and use of nuclear medicine can be used for treatments, and that can influence many studies, and that can also influence policy making and access to nuclear medicine treatments in Kenya. And then number two, I think I want to move from being an advocate, nuclear advocacy, to implementation phase. I want to go to the community and not only talk about these things, but do these things. So in Kenya, we have 47 counties, and only one county has access to nuclear medicine applications. So I would like that in 10 years, my government would install nuclear medicine application in these 47 counties within the country. So access is very important to me, and implementation is also very important in the next 10 years.
Thank you very much for all the panelists. It's been fascinating, not only to hear your personal journey, your experience, and also your expertise, knowledge on nuclear. I don't really know a lot about, well, I know very little about nuclear. So I actually have two probably technical side of questions. The first one is, I'm trying to understand for the nuclear to be scaled up, what kind of enabling conditions are needed. So I'm thinking about when we're talking about the solar and the wind, as you rightly pointed out, it's intermittent. So now you have an industry develop batteries to store the energy, because sometimes the solar and the wind turbine, they are overproducing electricity, but sometimes they're in a shortage. So you have the battery storage to kind of compensate that fluctuation. But for that kind of infrastructure, but I'm trying to understand for nuclear, what kind of enabling conditions needed. I know funding, research, that's the big thing. But apart from that, when it comes to infrastructure, is there something we need a bit more to scale it up? Second question is, I seem to hear a lot of buzz at this COP, people talking about modular nuclear. So can you just enlighten me a little bit about what is modular, nuclear? It sounds like it's viable, it's economically viable, but I'd love to hear a bit more from the experts on the panel. Thank you.
So the first question is what enabling conditions are needed to scale up nuclear? The second one is on just in general on modular reactors. Yeah. Sounds like a question for you, the first one. You want to take?
So in order to enable nuclear scaling up, we need to pick one design probably and make a conveyor. This is what China actually does. They pick one design, they make sure their logistics is adapted to create several elements of the same design. This way it becomes cheaper and faster to produce. I think that was the main mistake United States had when they built every single reactor from scratch, completely different, and that created the problem of the cost, growing cost. France did what China is doing now. They picked a couple of designs, they repeated them over and over again. And once you have this sort of conveyor, manufacturing conveyor, this is where you actually play with the cost and try to reduce it, because once you have this model designed, once you start producing it several times, like several pieces at a time, this is where you can cut the costs like several times. In terms of time, that also helps. So those are enablers for scaling up of nuclear. I don't know if someone else wanna take a second.
What I'll add to scaling up nuclear power, I think the first thing, government commitment. Macron was strong into saying nuclear has to be part of the mix. Government has to be upfront. Right now we have 32 countries plus Taiwan who has nuclear. 10 is in the process, including Egypt, of including nuclear as part of the mix. So government has to be upfront into not only extending the nuclear capacity they have, but building new. And that will go a long way. So I think that's very important, because we as nuclear advocates, we as young professionals, we can come to every COP, we can go to universities, schools, say, we need nuclear as part of the mix, but if policymakers, if governments don't make that decision, that's not going to happen. And the IPCC reports, IAEA reports, IAEA reports as well shows the facts are here. We know we need nuclear, right? So they have the science that backs it up. They need to take the decision now.
Anyone else? And does anyone want to take the question on small modular reactors?
So modularity comes, it's just you want to replace the pieces of reactor easier. But when we talk about advanced reactors, there are many aspects we want to tackle from the engineering point of view. We want to make it smaller, so you don't need to build it for like 10 years. You have a smaller piece that, again, you put in a conveyor, you repeat the piece again and again. So the time for building and construction and deployment shortens like from 10 years to 1 year. That's the ideal case. And then modularity. So right now we have some issues with replacing pieces, because again, nothing is standardized, all the pieces are different, and now we see the situation that something breaks and we don't no longer have a company which initially provided the certain component. And with modularity, this is where it comes handy. We have all these pieces provided all together in one place, and we can replace them easier. And at the same time, those modular reactors, depending on the size, they can be deployed in different areas, again, depending on the demand. So let's say we have smaller, well, micro reactors, which provide 1 megawatt to 100 megawatt capacity, which is enough to power like a small town of 10,000 people. And then we have small modular, which are from 100 to about like 300 megawatt, which are already for a bigger city. So it provides some versatility in terms of like, you don't need a big giant reactor. You want to put one smaller in an area which has smaller demand. So this is where the modularity coming from. So you can also stack up several of those modular reactors together to adapt to the demand, rather than build one 4 gigawatt electric big project that requires a lot of upfront costs and a long time commitment.
Thank you. Yeah, just that. I mean, I always like the analogy. You're going from like this mega project that's 1 or 2, 3 in a series, where you've got to have people permanently on the ground. You've got weather conditions to deal with. So you go to much more controlled factory conditions, and you go much more to the aerospace industry. Very complex piece of machinery that's just built on a factory production, and you can get lessons learned very quickly. You can concentrate your workforce. You can really drop down the prices, and just the scale, the size of the reactors is just smaller as well. Any more questions?
Well, it seems we have reached the end of our time. 5:30, right?
If there's any more questions, we can run over a little bit, I think. No?
Hi, afternoon, evening. Charlene Smith from the Breakthrough Institute, but also working alongside with Generation Atomic. And my question is similar to what Shirley had mentioned, but more so focusing on the short term, the now. So for example, actually 2 weeks ago, I quit my job as a nuclear engineer for the Idaho National Laboratory, where I was working on nuclear fuel development, performance, and qualification, to go more on the policy side of things, because there's a reassessment of what the barriers to entry are for nuclear energy in general, not only in the US, but globally. And so with that reassessment, at least personally for me, I decided, okay, well, I'm trying to do hands-on work, but the problem that I see specifically is on the policy framework and the regulation side. So that if I'm able to provide some type of technical insight to the regulatory bodies, then they can make better decisions on how to move forward with the regulatory framework. So that when I help with the policy and get the framework defined to license the new advanced reactors, then people like Shirley can go ahead and build those reactors. So for young people or young professionals now who are in different areas of the field, is there any specific areas that have challenge that are basically barriers to entry for nuclear energy globally? Where do you see those challenges, and what do you recommend, or what do you propose that young professionals just like yourself do in order to essentially adjust to the industry based on the need or based on the barriers or the challenges that we face currently?
Charlene, great question. I'll give my view. I think, like before, one thing I saw is when us as nuclear activists or young professional, we go to explain to the public, we say nuclear. I think it's good to start with climate change, what's been happening, and drill down from there. We know that 75% of the carbon comes from the energy industry, right? So how do we take it from there, use nuclear to decarbonize so that we minimize the effect of climate change? Instead of just going to say, hey, nuclear is a great energy, we need to use it. So showing people that bigger picture, I think that will help us come a long way.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I think one of the biggest barriers for nuclear to develop right now is this issue of cost overruns and delays. I'm not sure whether young generation can offer a solution to this problem, but I think from the communication point of view, what people are saying all the time, nuclear takes years to build. Nuclear is super expensive. So I guess we should work together to come up with the solutions with the projects that are deployable, that work, and with the financial instruments that can take into account these additional costs, and for people to understand that in the long-term perspective, it's not expensive and it's beneficial.
I'll second that, because main question we're seeing that main challenge we're seeing is how much it costs and how long it takes. But another problem I see is that we don't publicize good examples, like Baraka power plant was on time, on budget, and unfortunately I keep seeing people not aware of that success that's been happening in the last few years. And that one of the things that how can we publicize that? We need more PR people who are coming from completely different backgrounds. We not necessarily need only engineers. We need them, but we also need to bring up more diverse group of people who have economics background, who have PR background, communication background, and work together, because the problem is common. Problem is climate change and all the adaptation and mitigation strategies we need to go for. And I think this kind of disconnect between where the information is and where the rest of the public is one of the biggest gap I see to, like, for nuclear to get into new places. And this gap haven't been covered because we at COP keep seeing people referring to Fukushima and other accidents, which are really big accidents, but that also help the industry to learn where the weak weak parts of the power plants and enhance them to make sure that never happens again. So I think we need to communicate better. We need to involve more diverse public and work together on different projects. And that's what I see we can overcome the barriers to entry for nuclear energy.
Thank you so much, Charlene, for a good question. And I want to congratulate you for your courage in moving from the technical side to the policy table. So it's a very great way. So I would like to speak on behalf of Africa. So in Africa, usually the guys who are in the policy or implementation side are usually the older guys. We call them the evening generation. So I think it's important for us, and especially in my country, to increase the human capacity, which is really lacking. So that, because you can only share what you have, right? So if we allow the older guys, maybe who are not well knowledgeable in these sectors, to make decisions for us, then the nuclear energy agenda will be moving to the wrong direction. So I think if more young people would be able to access these nuclear-related fields and education opportunities, then they will be able to be influencing decisions at the policy table.
Thank you, Evelyn. That brings us to the end of our panel, where I would just like to go over some of the things I've heard from our young leaders. We will soon be drinking our first cup of desalinated ocean water. We will soon be having shipping and spacecraft propulsed by nuclear sources. We will have nuclear energy complementing renewable energy sources in the energy mixes of tomorrow. So really, thank you for opening our eyes on these topics. And the only thing for me left to do is to thank you, thank the audience, thank the people at home for a great panel.